I still remember the sunlight that morning. It felt different, brighter, almost like the world had been quietly waiting for something to happen. I had woken up earlier than usual, not because of any plan, but because something inside me felt alive. I couldn't explain it then, but now I know. Sometimes life whispers before it speaks loudly. That morning was one of those whispers. I made my coffee, looked out the window at the same familiar street, the same cracked sidewalk, the same ordinary rhythm of my neighborhood, and yet, I felt as if I was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. I almost ignored it. I had dozens of messages every day, most of them automated, some spam, some job updates that never went anywhere. But something about the subject line made my heart pause. Asterisk, a special invitation, from Elon Musk's office. Asterisk, I blinked, stared, reread it 3 times. I laughed out loud, thinking it was a scam. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. Inside was a short, polite message. It said my name, correctly spelled, and stated that Mr. Musk's team had been following a social impact initiative I had been part of months ago, a volunteer project that helped rural schools access basic solar lighting. They said he was inspired by my story, by the persistence behind it, and that he wanted to personally meet me. I froze. It didn't feel real. My mind ran in circles trying to find the trick in it. Why me? What could I possibly have done that would draw the attention of someone like him? But the message was official. It came from a verified domain, with a signature and a scheduled date, 3 days from now, at a SpaceX facility. I sat there, heart pounding, half thrilled, half terrified. I thought about my life, the long nights of uncertainty, the struggles that almost broke me, the times I wanted to give up. And now this email, this spark of recognition from someone whose name the world knew. It wasn't just about fame, it was about being seen. For the next few days, I barely slept. I reread that email countless times. I prepared questions, practiced answers, and still doubted everything. But something inside me, some small, strong voice, kept whispering, "Don't overlook this moment." When the day arrived, I felt like I was walking into another world. The SpaceX facility was massive, gleaming with metallic precision and quiet power. Engineers moved like focused lightning, their minds clearly orbiting thoughts higher than most of us can imagine. When they escorted me through the gates, I kept my breathing steady, trying to remember that no matter how grand the setting, I was here because something about my heart, my work, had resonated. Then the moment came. The doors opened, and there he was, Elon Musk, standing casually near a prototype vehicle, his hands in his pockets, a calm half-smile on his face. He said my name. Just that. And for a second, everything around me faded, the sounds, the movement, the disbelief. He looked at me with this mix of curiosity and respect, as if trying to read beyond my expression, beyond what the world could see. "Hey," he said simply. "You've got a good heart. I read about what you've been doing. Not many people keep going when no one's watching." I couldn't find words. I managed to thank him, awkwardly, but he just nodded, as if the gratitude wasn't necessary. "You reminded me why innovation matters," he said. Not for applause, not for profit, but because it can change lives. Then he gestured toward the car behind him, a sleek, shining Tesla, unlike any I'd ever seen. "This one's yours," he said. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard him. "Mine?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah. I think people like you should drive what represents the future. Consider it a small gift, a reminder to keep moving forward." The world spun for a second. I stared at the car, the reflection of the sky on its flawless surface, and then back at him. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Don't say anything," he replied. "Just use it well. And remember, this isn't about the car. It's about recognizing your heart." I stood there, speechless, the key card trembling between my fingers. It was small, light, simple, just a sliver of technology, but it carried the weight of a dream I never even thought to dream. I looked at it, then at him, trying to process everything. Elon's expression stayed calm, kind but purposeful. "You've earned this moment," he said. "You didn't wait for anyone's permission to do something good. That's rare. Keep that spirit alive." Then he turned to speak with an engineer, leaving me standing there in the sunlight, the hum of innovation filling the air like quiet thunder. When I finally walked toward the car, I felt the world tilt slightly. The Tesla gleamed like it was carved from light itself. I could see my reflection in the surface, nervous, astonished, small but somehow significant. The doors opened with that futuristic smoothness, and as I sat inside, the scent of newness surrounded me. The screen lit up, the systems came alive, and a soft voice greeted me. For a second, I just sat there, unable to move, letting the reality sink in. It wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol, a mirror reflecting back every moment I doubted myself, every time I thought my effort didn't matter, every night I had stayed awake wondering if doing good in small ways ever really changed anything. And now, here I was, holding proof that it did. Driving out of the facility was surreal. The security gates opened, the sun hit the windshield, and as the car glided forward, I felt something shift inside me. The road ahead looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. Every turn felt symbolic, every sound felt alive with meaning. As the city unfolded before me, I thought about the journey that had led here. The countless times I'd been told to be practical, to stop chasing impossible ideals, to settle. I remembered those who mocked the idea of purpose-driven work, who saw kindness as weakness. Yet in this moment, every sacrifice, every tear, every lonely decision felt justified. The universe had seen it all quietly, and now it had responded in the most unexpected way. I pulled over near a quiet park and just sat there for a while. Children were laughing in the distance, playing with a ball, their voices filled with innocence. I watched them and thought, this is why, not for recognition. Not for material things. But for that laughter, that joy, that simple ripple of goodness that multiplies when one person chooses to act from the heart. I thought about Elon's words, "It's not about the car." They echoed in my mind again and again. He hadn't rewarded me for success. He had acknowledged effort, intention, and heart. And that realization hit me deeper than anything else could. I touched the steering wheel and whispered, "Thank you." But the gratitude wasn't just for him, it was for life itself. For every challenge that had prepared me for this, for every moment that had tested my faith, for every unseen hand that had guided me through. As I began to drive again, I started thinking differently. What if every act of good we do, no matter how small, is being quietly noticed by the universe? What if recognition doesn't come when we expect it, but when we need to be reminded that we matter? That day, I started believing it was true. The car became more than transportation, it became a vessel of reflection. I drove through streets I'd walked as a dreamer, past old shops and corners that carried pieces of my story. I saw people waiting at bus stops, rushing through life, tired but hopeful. I realized then that everyone, in their own way, is waiting for a sign that their efforts count. I decided that this gift wouldn't end with me. It had to mean something more. I began to plan as I drove, to use it for good, to take this moment and turn it into momentum for others. Maybe I could start a mentorship program for young innovators, or a fund for community projects. Maybe this car could be more than a symbol, it could be a catalyst. When I reached home, the street looked the same, but I didn't. My neighbors gathered as the sleek car stopped in front of my modest house. They stared, half curious, half amazed. One of them asked, "Whose car is that?" I smiled and said softly, "It's a reminder." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every moment in my head, the handshake, the words, the quiet intensity in Elon's eyes when he said I had a good heart. I realized that recognition from the world is fleeting, but recognition from someone who truly understands purpose, it stays. It anchors you. As the hours passed, I started writing down everything I felt. Not to share it online, not for applause, but to remember. I wrote about perseverance, about staying kind in a world that tests you, about believing in unseen rewards. It became a kind of letter to my past self, a promise that I would never again doubt the value of sincerity. When dawn broke, I looked outside and saw the car parked under the pale gold sky. It looked peaceful, almost like it belonged there. I realized then that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. A call to live more consciously, to give more freely, to never overlook the moments that seem small but change everything. I whispered a prayer of thanks, not to luck, but to life itself, for reminding me that the universe notices genuine hearts, even when the world doesn't. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I had in years. There was a quiet kind of excitement in my chest, not the rush of adrenaline that fades after a big moment, but the steady hum of purpose that grows after you've been reminded of who you are. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the sun rise, and the car gleamed in the soft orange light below, almost like it was waiting for me to understand something deeper. I thought about how strange life can be, how one simple act, one gesture of recognition, can change the way you see everything. Elon Musk didn't just hand me a car. He handed me a reflection of my own effort, my resilience, my belief that small actions can ripple out into something vast. For years, I'd worked quietly, often unseen, sometimes mocked for being too idealistic. And yet, somehow, all those unseen hours had led here. I decided that day to make the gift count. It wasn't enough to simply drive a beautiful car, it had to mean more. So I began reaching out, to schools, to young people who had ideas but no platform, to dreamers who reminded me of who I used to be. I told them my story, not to impress, but to prove that the world still rewards authenticity. Within a week, something unexpected began to happen. People reached out from across the city, some from other countries even, saying my story gave them hope. They said it reminded them that genuine kindness still matters, that good intentions can still find their way into the spotlight. It was humbling. The more I read their messages, the more I understood what Elon meant when he said, "It's about recognizing your heart." The car became a moving message. Every place I went, people noticed it, its clean lines, its futuristic glow. But when they asked about it, I told them the truth: this car isn't about wealth or luck. It's about perseverance. It's about faith in doing the right thing even when nobody's watching. Some listened politely, others deeply. But every time I said those words, I felt something healing inside me, as if every doubt I'd ever carried was slowly dissolving. One afternoon, I drove to a small town about 2 hours away. It was the place where I had started my first project years ago, helping install small solar panels for a school that didn't have steady electricity. I hadn't been back since those early days when the work was hard, and the rewards were invisible. When I arrived, the school looked brighter, fuller of life. The children I once helped were now older, some in high school, their eyes filled with that same light that had once inspired me. The principal recognized me instantly and called out my name with warmth that made my heart swell. He asked about the car, of course, and I told him the story. When I finished, he just nodded and said, "You see, good things come to those who do good without expecting anything back. Life notices." His words struck deep. They were simple, but they carried the same truth I had felt ever since that day at SpaceX, that real rewards don't arrive when we chase them. They come quietly, when we least expect them, often wrapped in humility. As I stood there watching the children play, I realized how far I had come, not in distance or status, but in understanding. For so long, I had measured progress by recognition, by visible success. But this experience had taught me that the real progress happens inside us. The car, the meeting, the acknowledgement, they were symbols, yes, but they pointed towards something eternal, the power of doing good for its own sake. When I drove back that evening, the sky was painted in streaks of gold and violet. The car glided almost silently, the world passing by like a moving canvas. And in that silence, I felt gratitude deeper than words. Gratitude for the unseen hours, for the failures that had taught me persistence, for the moments of doubt that had forced me to strengthen my faith. I began to whisper affirmations as I drove, keep going. Don't lose your softness. Don't let success harden you. Remember why you started, it became like a meditation, the hum of the tires, the rhythm of breath, the heartbeat of purpose. When I reached home, I noticed a letter on my doorstep. No sender's name, just my address in neat handwriting. Inside was a note that read, I saw your story. I was about to give up on my dream, but your journey made me try again. Thank you for reminding me that effort still matters. Asterisk, there was no signature, no name, just that. I sat there for a long time, holding that note. It hit me then, this is what recognition truly means. Not fame. Not wealth. But impact. The ability to spark someone else's courage, to remind them that their path is still worth walking. That's the kind of wealth no car, no amount of money, could ever equal. That night, I looked at the stars and smiled. Maybe that's why Elon had chosen me. Not because I was special, but because I was ordinary, and yet willing to keep believing when it would have been easier to stop. Maybe that was the message all along, that the universe doesn't reward perfection, it rewards persistence. As the days went on, my life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still challenges, still bills, still doubts that crept in at times. But every time I touched the steering wheel, I remembered the words that had changed everything. Asterisk, it's not about the car. It's about recognizing your heart. Asterisk, and I promised myself I'd live every day worthy of that recognition, not by achieving more, but by giving more, loving more, and trusting the process more deeply than ever before. Weeks turned into months, and life found a new rhythm, not one of sudden fame or luxury, but of quiet purpose. The story of the car spread far beyond what I ever expected. It reached communities I had never visited, inspired young people I'd never met, and opened conversations about what true recognition really means. But through it all, I stayed grounded. Every morning, I reminded myself that the car was not a trophy, but a tool, a reminder that life rewards authenticity when we least expect it. Sometimes, when I parked it outside a small school or a charity meeting, people would stare. They'd whisper, "That's the one Elon Musk gave." And every time, I'd smile gently and say, "No, it's the one life gave, through him." Because the truth was deeper. Elon had simply been a messenger, a vessel of timing and grace. The real giver was the universe, that mysterious, infinite energy that connects good intentions to their moments of recognition. I began to speak more publicly, not as a motivational speaker, but as a storyteller. I visited schools, small business forums, even orphanages. I told my story, not to inspire awe, but to plant seeds of faith. I told them that the moments we call miracles often begin as choices. That effort, even when unseen, creates its own echo. That sometimes, all it takes is one act of belief to draw the universe's gaze. Every time I looked into someone's eyes while sharing my story, I saw a reflection of who I once was, hopeful, uncertain, longing for proof that goodness still mattered. And in those moments, I realized the car wasn't the miracle. The connection was. The awakening was. There were days, of course, when I still struggled. Days when I questioned whether I could live up to the message my story had come to represent. But on those days, I would drive, not to escape, but to remember. I'd take long routes through quiet roads, watching the horizon stretch endlessly ahead, and I'd whisper to myself, "Keep moving forward." One evening, after a long day at a community event, I received a message from Elon's assistant. It simply said, "He wanted you to know, he's proud of what you've done with the gift." I stared at the words for a long time, feeling a rush of gratitude that had no place to go except inward. Because I understood now, acknowledgement from the outside is precious, but the true transformation happens when you start recognizing your own worth from within. As time passed, my projects grew. What began as small acts of goodwill became larger initiatives: clean energy programs, mentorship for young innovators, and sustainability awareness drives. The car became a symbol wherever it went, not of wealth, but of heart. And people treated it that way. They didn't just admire it, they asked about its story. They wanted to believe that life, too, could notice them. And the truth is, it can. Looking back, I realized that the greatest lesson wasn't about generosity, or even destiny, it was about attention. How we give it, how we earn it, how we direct it. The world had noticed me because I had refused to stop noticing others. That was the quiet law of the universe I had stumbled upon: what you give sincerely will always return, but not in the way you expect. Years later, when I was invited to speak at an innovation summit, I found myself walking onto a stage lit with the same golden light that had filled that first morning. The host introduced me not as a recipient of Elon Musk's gift, but as someone who turned a gift into a mission. As I spoke, I didn't talk about success. I talked about faith, the kind that persists when no one's watching. I told them about how every act of kindness is a seed, invisible at first, growing silently under the surface. And how sometimes, the harvest arrives when we've almost forgotten we planted it. The audience was silent for a moment after I finished. Then, they stood and clapped. It wasn't the applause that moved me, but the faces, people smiling not out of admiration, but recognition. They understood. They felt it. And that was the true reward. After the event, I went back to where it all began, my old neighborhood. The streets looked the same, but they carried a new energy now. Children waved when I passed, people stopped me to ask questions, and I told them the same thing I had told myself that first night: never overlook a small moment. Sometimes, it's the universe opening a door you can't yet see. I parked the car under a quiet tree, the same kind of place where I used to dream. The evening breeze moved softly, carrying the scent of possibility. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had unfolded: the message, the meeting, the gift, the growth. And then I realized something beautiful: Elon Musk hadn't just given me a car. He had given me a mirror, one that reflected the truth I had forgotten, that the power to change my life had always been inside me. Recognition doesn't come from wealth or fame, it comes when your heart aligns with your purpose. It comes when you refuse to give up, when you keep believing in what's right even when no one claps. It comes when your faith becomes louder than your fear. I whispered to myself, as the stars began to rise, this is what it means to be recognized by life. And for the first time, I didn't need applause, validation, or proof. I felt peace, the kind that comes when you finally understand that every struggle, every doubt, every sleepless night had been leading to this quiet realization. Life sees you when you act with heart. The universe listens when you love without reason. And when the time is right, it will send someone, or something, to remind you that you were never unseen. That day, Elon Musk had been that reminder. But the real gift was not parked outside my home. It was parked inside my soul, a reminder that when you lead with authenticity, life itself becomes your vehicle, driving you toward everything meant for you. And as I looked one last time at the car gleaming under the starlight, I smiled and whispered, "Thank you, not for the car, but for recognizing my heart."